Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Oliver, and today we're going to discuss the topic about economic migration and Brexit. For the introduction section, myself, Oliver, is going to talk about the migration in the UK, push and pull theories, and student loan. Carlota is going to discuss the reasons for EU migrants to leave their home countries and means to avoid exploitation. Sheila is going to mention about the attitudes towards migration and visa restrictions. Finally, Corinne is going to be talking about the Brexit impact on workforce trends and migration. And at the end, we have the conclusion section and we have the question section as well. And at the very end, we have reference. Now, let's discuss migration into the UK. People migrate because their current country or state could not fulfill their promises in the work field. By using the UK as an example, the colonial history of the UK is important in considering historical patterns of international migration. When it comes to ideology, it can make a difference. Back in World War II, different ideologies have threatened the life of those who's afraid to change. For example, Germany and the Soviet Union, notably those fueling fascism, those seeking to escape communist rules. And now push and pull theories are going to be discussed. With migrants workers driven to leave their countries or origins by low living standards, a lack of opportunities, and political or environmental considerations and oriented to certain countries by a demand for labor and economic opportunities, and better political and environmental conditions. So as you can see in the figures, for push factors, there are environmental, social, economics, and political issues that can force the citizens of the country to leave the country. And for pull factors like environmental, social, economic, and political also suits, but it's for the citizen to try to seek for safety, opportunity, stability, and freedom. And now the case study of a northern English town offers a glimpse of life when migrants leave will be presented. So locals worry about who will care for the elderly and wait on tables in restaurants if migrants continue to leave. More would primary school teachers who specialize in working with minority groups says many people in Harrogate don't realize how much migrants do for them. They are beginning to find out, and soon the rest of Britain will too. And now student loan will be discussed. In order to receive fundings from the government in the UK, student needs to be qualified as a home student, and the conditions are listed below. Usually lives in England, Wales, Northern Ireland, or Scotland, or have settled status. Being a UK national is not the only way to receive student loans. A European Union national, Swiss national, the child of a Turkish worker, a refugee, or an asylum seeker can also receive student loan from the government. Which means that for other nationalities who studies in the UK, there are zero chances for them to get fundings from the UK government. The tuition fee for home students can pay up to £9,000 a year, and overseas fees range from £4,000 to £18,000 a year. So now let's talk about the teachers' loans. On the teacher's side, if a teacher is qualified as a teacher outside the UK, then the teacher can train for qualified teacher status QTS while the teacher works in the UK.
General migration main aim when moving abroad is to find a job that subsists them, and therefore a majority of them ends up only finding temporary work. However, there are other reasons for workers to move abroad, such as for instrumental reasons like learning a new language or to avoid political crisis. Advantages on hiring foreign employees are that many employers believe that foreign employees offer high levels of commitment, availability, and flexibility. Majority of English employees move to UK to learn English and send their income back home, according to Denge 2006, and therefore they were more willing to accept lower wages and precarious work conditions. Disadvantages on hiring foreign employees are that language barrier, when workers are not fluent in English, and lack of liability due to the lack of length of their stay. Many migrant workers only work for a short period of time to learn the language or to gain skills in order to obtain a higher position in the long run. According to Mills and Blossfield 2005, employers have assumptions that migrant workers are more willing to work on a low pay and precarious work environment. That being said, labor mobility power is a movement where migrants build a strategic scheme to fight employers' exploitation in a way that would allow employees to learn new skills and invest in their social lives. Therefore, migrant workers frequently leave the host country to their home country, or they rotate between jobs in order to avoid having temporary work experience and harsh job settings. Job rotation also relies in factors such as family background, security, quality life, and cultural richness. According to a study in a northern English city, A8 migration brought two types of citizenship due to tensions in obtaining jobs and houses, which are the defensive and proactive citizenship. Proactive citizenship represents the new migrant citizens that were trying to find new ways to settle in England, while the defensive citizenship is represented by the local communities who saw migrants as competition, as a reason for cut wages, as an obstacle for locals to get jobs. However, there are no proof of any of these claims, since social housing is heavily restricted to foreign UK residents and they end up relying on in-house renting systems.
The attitudes towards migration. The overall attitude towards migration has raised several concerns, particularly to the definitions and categories as to what constitutes as an immigrant. Individuals and survey organizations have had different ideas on the subject matter. Many important issues greatly depend on who is addressed as an immigrant. For example, policies often refer to a certain category of migrants who have taken a particular path of entry into the country, such as those who come into the UK with university or job offers. According to a recent Global Market and Opinion Research Specialist report, the evidence suggests that there is a high number of those who are opposed towards the issue of immigration into the UK. In recent surveys, majority of respondents think that there are too many migrants, that fewer migrants should be let into the country, and that legal restriction on immigration should be tighter. However, that is not particularly new concern, as preferences for reduced migration have always existed in the British election study. As they began asking public opinion on matters of immigration as far back as 1964, as a response to the growing concern about new Commonwealth immigration. Concerns about migration applies to both EU and non-EU migration, according to the Transatlantic Trends in 2014 across 13 European countries. Despite general opposition towards immigration, there are differing attitudes towards immigration depending on the type of immigration it is. For instance, according to a 2011 Migration Observatory study, found that attitudes towards high-skilled migrants, students, and close family members were viewed more favorably than those towards low-skilled labor migrants, extended family members, and asylum seekers. A 2010 study also found that in order to cope with increasing health demands, 72% of the public supported admitting more nurses and doctors from other countries, while 51% supported admitting more care workers to help the burdens of an aging population. Approval was more dependent on cost-benefit outcome. However, due to the lack of one consistent definition of who constitutes as an immigrant, makes it a challenge to get a realistic understanding of public opinion. For example, until January 15th, the survey results had combined immigration and race relations into a single category. While the evidence can still be valid, there needs to be careful consideration from related but distinct issues on the issue on migration. Visa restrictions. Though not enough evidence has been provided to support or refute any claims about the current potential policies post-Brexit, a high proportion of EU citizens in the UK may be permitted to a special status under EU law. However, the right to permanent residence under the law may or may not survive. Up to 5 out of 6 EU migrants may be eligible to permanent residence by the time of Brexit. The analysis by the Immigration Observatory 2016 points out that those eligible for permanent residence will be based on when they first arrived to the UK. If the UK remains in the EU for another 2 years, this would mean that those who have stayed within the country 3 years prior could become eligible too. Citizens of the other EU countries get the right to stay only if they have lived in the UK continuously and legally for 5 years and meet other criteria. Non-EU residents will likely have the same opportunity. The number of visas offered may double and be open to that who see the promise in the field of technology, art, and creative industries. According to the Economic Times, Prime Minister Theresa May has announced, as part of her post-Brexit strategy, to present Britain as an open global talent. The current number of visas available through this visa route would increase from 1,000 to 2,000 a year through the Tier 1 Exceptional Talent Visa. This would at least counteract any effects on the labour markets in the UK after Brexit.
Since the UK's decision to leave the European Union, organisations have seen and predicted a further rise in workforce issues. Firms expect the biggest changes to occur over the next 3 years, with the biggest challenges being competition for highly qualified staff and skilled employees. Organisations therefore must remain aware of the potential change which could occur, while still attracting high-skilled employees but ensuring they are focusing on developing their existing staff members. The reduction in the number of migrants in employment plays a significant factor in why there is still demand for labour and a decline in supply. Therefore, if the gap is going to continue or worsen as the Brexit process continues, it will be essential for organisations to invest in building the skills they need to improve their service within the future. In 2016, organisations focused on recruiting 9% of migrants, whereas in 2017 they focused on recruiting 10%. So therefore, there has been a slight increase in the focus by 1%, despite the threats of Brexit, showing that organisations are still anticipating recruiting non-EU nationals. Brexit has led to organisations considering moving abroad, with 24% saying they will move or are considering moving their operations to a country outside of the European Union, although around a third of firms state they are not sure where they would relocate, reiterating the uncertain times in which organisations are to face as a result of Brexit. Almost 1 in 5 employers who have recruitment difficulties do not have a training budget, with more than half of employers saying their organisation is upskilling their existing workforce in order to improve their future talent, perhaps suggesting that organisations can survive these changing times through their existing staff gaining the relevant skills. If the UK adopt a new immigration regime, it means moving away from the current free movement within the EU. While we don't yet know what this new system will look like, it is likely that it will place greater restrictions on immigration, possibly moving towards the government's manifesto promise of bringing net migration down, but also allowing more skilled migrants into the country. The rights of existing migrant workers need to be safeguarded to avoid damage, as organisations are reliant on migrants. Given that migrants in these sectors earn a lot less than the average UK citizen wage, it is unlikely that these sectors will be able to substitute migrant workers for UK citizens' labour without rethinking their business operations. A particular concern is the fact that the UK cannot limit the number of EU migrants which choose to move to the UK. With immigration playing an important part of the recent EU referendum campaign, it has been suggested that concerns about immigration led to the Brexit vote. The increase in net migration has coincided with an increase in public concern, but however it has been suggested that this was the pace of change rather than the number of migrants in an area. For example, areas with a large proportion of migrants were more likely to vote Remain in the EU. The Windrush generation have been unable to obtain British citizenship despite living here for most of their lives and contributing to the British economic growth. The issue being, couples brought their children into the UK on their passports. Therefore, this generation have faced threats of deportation and have been unable to work. It was recently announced that any members of the Commonwealth countries from 1948 to 1973 will be granted British citizenship if they wish to apply. My point being is that even though there is speculation for the government to reduce immigration, they are providing citizenship to a generation of people, meaning there is evidence for how Brexit will impact immigration as the government are allowing more people previously classed as immigrants to become citizens.
To conclude, Whilst those that migrate to the UK all have different reasons for doing so, the UK is viewed as offering migrants a better quality of life and the ability to become financially stable. The attitudes regarding immigration are divided between two views. Some people recognize the benefits brought by growth of migration, since A8 workers come to respond to English employers' needs of finding employees who were willing to do the dirty jobs that were frequently rejected by native workers. On the other hand, there will always be citizens, usually from a lower socioeconomic background, who have more extreme views regarding immigration. These are those individuals who view migrants as taking British jobs, social housing, and their health and financial benefits. Overall, migration movement brought profits to UK, but there is no enough data that shows what happens to a country after they leave the EU, meaning what is to happen to the UK's immigration policy in the future remains uncertain.
So now we're going to answer some questions. Carlota, to what degree do your experiences suggest that policy change makes an impact on the decisions of economic migrants?
Before Brexit, a main factor that influenced migrants' decision and made UK a main attraction to AA residents was England's open labour market and the small discrepancies between native and foreign incomes in the UK permanent economy. However, after Brexit, there have been claims that people do not feel secure in the country, especially after tensions and clashes between unprivileged communities that see migrants as competition for unskilled jobs. Migrants are also seen as a means to source health and house resources. Therefore, the country chose to close their borders to European migrants, and there is a flow of A8 residents in UK moving back to their home countries for jobs, house, and health security reasons.
Thank you, Carlota. Oliver, in your experience, do you feel that citizenship, nationality, or race is a more significant feature of the debate around economic migration?
I felt like the citizenship is the most important feature in the economic migration, because if I'm migrating to another country, the first thing that I want to get is the citizenship, which can ensure my stay within the country and gain benefits from the welfare system. Of course, nationalities and race are also important, but when it comes to economic migrations, citizenships would definitely be the main objective for those immigrants. So Sheila, what's your opinion on this question?
While I agree with your point, it can be argued that race and citizenship play a part in the debate. However, based on research and experience, it can be said that nationality plays a more significant only due to how immigration policies and freedom of movement within the UK affect those from different countries. Certain countries provide enhanced services which will expedite their visa application. The relationship between those two countries will define how the rules and policies around every application go. And finally, Corinne, if you were making a decision about immigrating, what would be the most important factor to influence you?
If I were making the decision to emigrate the UK, the most important factor to influence me to leave the country would be job security, meaning that I would know that once I had gained a job, it was mine to keep for as long as I wanted it. Also, a part of having job security would include me having a significant period of time to live in the country of choice, without the threat of deportation hanging around.